All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Red Grace Media. My name is Emilio Ramos, and today excited to bring a new program to Red Grace. It's actually an old program. It's something we used to do when we did the podcast here at Red Grace, and that is 7-Minute Seminary, backed by popular demand. Some people used to listen to the podcast just to get those little 7-minute clips of some theological topic that I would cover and try to explain in the context of 7 minutes. And so today, we are happy to reintroduce that, relaunch that, and start doing this time videos where we talk about 7-Minute Seminary. We talk about topics, theology, doctrine, and we do that in bite-sized form, of course. But here's the deal. With these videos, what I want to start doing is actually taking topics and cover them in 7 minutes, but then I also want to do a deep dive into some of those topics, because some of those topics, let's face it, some of those issues, they need a lot more explanation. They need a lot more theology, a lot more teaching, a lot more time. And so I'm going to kind of do both. I'll do a snapshot of a doctrine, a snapshot of a teaching, of a topic, of a subject in theology, and then I'll do a much deeper view into that subject as well. So kind of look for both of those, actually. So the 7-Minute Seminary, that's something you want to follow, and then also look for the deeper content as well. With each one of these doctrines, we're going to provide links to resources down below. Be sure and look to those. Also, as with all of our videos, make sure in the comment section below that you type in any questions that you have. We're gonna be collecting these questions on all these topics, and then in a future episode, just do nothing but talk about Q&A. So with that said, today I picked a subject that I thought was not just important for everybody, not just something that everybody wants to talk about, but something that I think is absolutely essential for your theology. And it may not be what you think, but it's the topic of eschatology. Now, eschatology is an explosively controversial subject. It's a divisive subject. It's the subject that divides camps, and even churches are built around the subject of eschatology and where you stand on that particular eschatological view. And also it tends to inform groups of people in terms of their hermeneutic. And so depending on your hermeneutic, depending on your understanding of how to interpret scripture, that can also have a huge impact, very, very huge impact on how you look and how you think about the subject of eschatology. So with that, let's get right to it. When we're thinking about eschatology, several things come into view in terms of where do we begin, where do we start talking about the subject of eschatology. Well, let me define the word eschatology. It comes from two words, eschatos and logos, which basically means last and then word or speech. And so it is the speech or the word or the teaching of last things. Another very important subject to eschatology is the subject of protology. So kind of like eschatology, it comes from protos, which means first, and logos, so the study of first things. And the reason I mention that is because in Scripture, you really have that. You have the study of last things, and you have the study of first things. The study of first things tends to be Genesis 1, 2, and 3, really, the prologue of the Bible. The study of last things, people tend to categorize only as referring to those passages of Scripture that predict future events, as found, for example, in the Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24, or in passages out of First and 2nd Thessalonians, or in, of course, the book of Revelation. But honestly, guys, this is a huge hermeneutical distinction when it comes to authors, theologians, and different people talking and teaching on the subject of eschatology. If you do not understand that your eschatology is also going to be contingent upon whether or not you realize that protology, study of first things, and eschatology go together. Now, with that, understand that in eschatology, you have different camps. You have let's begin with people and where they land on issues dealing with the probably most important subject of all, which is the millennium. You have the premillennial view, you have a historic premillennial view, you have an amillennial view, and then you have a postmillennial view. Now, the premillennial view, typically associated with dispensationalism, believes that after Jesus Christ returns, there will be a literal 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ on this earth. And in Jerusalem, present-day Palestine, is the regions of Israel there, and that we are to look forward to a literal physical reign of Jesus Christ from Jerusalem on planet Earth, on this planet, not a renewed planet, but on this planet, immediately following the events surrounding the second coming, or also known as the parousia. Now, historic premillennialism believes that though there is a literal physical reign of Christ coming to this earth, they don't necessarily subscribe to much of the literalism of the classic premillennial positions. And so they don't necessarily even believe, many of them don't even believe in an actual literal 1,000 years, but that it will be some sort of extended time. They don't believe, for example, that there will be some sort of literal rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. That's another feature of premillennial, historic premillennialism and things like that. There will not be renewed sacrifices during the millennium and those kinds of things. And they certainly will not be a distinction between Jew and Gentile in the millennium, the way that classic premill positions teach. Now, the next one is Amillennialism. Amillennialism doesn't necessarily mean no millennium, but it does mean that it is not a literal millennium. It is a millennium that is either symbolic, spiritual, or heavenly. And so the millennium is not something future, it's something already. It's something that's happening now, either by virtue of the fact that Jesus Christ is reigning presently in the hearts, spiritually in the hearts of his people, or probably more my position is that it is a reference to heavenly time of the saints who die and come to life and reign with Christ. That is in the heavenly realms. And so Amillennialism does not believe in a literal physical reign of Christ on this earth. And so I'll come back to that in a minute. And then the other one is postmillennialism. Postmillennialism and amillennialism are very similar in that they believe that the millennium is not literal. It will not unfold in literal time as if you could put a stopwatch to 1,000 years. But they believe that it is also somewhat symbolical, typological, spiritual, something like that. The difference between amill and postmill, though, is that postmillennialism sees that the return of Christ is something that is ushered in by the church as we Christianize the world and the culture, and that essentially the world is heading towards some sort of Christian golden age. In other words, that tends to be characterized as a optimistic view of the future of this age. And then premill, amill, and historic premill tend to view the age that we live in right now more pessimistically. Not that we're to walk around with our heads down, but just that we believe that the age will get worse, that persecution will increase, and that the church will go through great tribulation prior to the return of Christ. So with that, I mean, I'm going a little bit over 7 minutes, but that's okay because we did an intro to this video. But with that, just the reason that I take the amillennial position now is because I do not believe that when Jesus Christ returns, and we'll cover more of this in a more in-depth video, but when Jesus Christ returns, he does not return, listen very closely now, he does not return to a sub-eschatological state of affairs. Meaning, when Jesus returns, that's it. He puts his enemies under his feet. He rewards his people, rescues, delivers, and redeems his people, and he destroys and he condemns the wicked. And therefore, when Jesus Christ returns, what that immediately results in is the issuing forth of a new heavens and a new earth that Peter talks about. That's what we should really be longing for. New heaven, new earth, wherein dwells righteousness. And so that's more of the millennial sort of perspective. We do not believe that Jesus will return, reign on this earth with sin in his presence. Because in the premillennial scheme, you must understand that after the return of Christ, the world will go through one more great cataclysmic war, a battle of Gog and Magog, referenced in Revelation chapter 20, verses, I think it's verses 8 through 10. And there, that war is to be distinguished, they would say, premillennialists would say, from the battle of Armageddon or Harmageddon, mentioned earlier in the Bible, like in Revelation chapter 16. And so those are some of the things that distinguish eschatology down the lines. And so I hope you've enjoyed this video. If sure, make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along. And make sure you get the resources below. Okay, God bless you. Thanks so much.